Hello and welcome to the Mainframes, where we take a dive into the lives of artists and creatives working out of Mainframe Studios. I'm here today with painter Gary Hoff. Gary, how are you doing today?
Well, pretty good considering.
Great. Well, let's start with a little check-in. Life's been really different for so many of us lately. So can you talk to us a little bit about how your life or your artistic practice has been affected by recent events?
Oh my, I think probably a lot like everyone else. For one thing, I've spent more time at my home studio than I have here at Mainframe, primarily because, well, there's more freedom. I don't have to wear a mask at home for one thing, or well, walk around and all that. So, but on the other hand, I haven't seen as much of the public, and that's been problematic, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I'm also feeling that sort of isolation fever that I think many of us have right now.
Yep.
So, talk to us a little bit about your background. When did you start painting? Have you always considered yourself an artist?
Well, I'll answer the when I started and then try to come to the second one. When I was a kid, I was 13 or so, my grandmother gave me a set of oil paints. And to this day, I don't know why she did that, but she showed me how to mix some colors and how to paint some pictures. And so I was hooked at that time. That was 60 years ago. And in the interim, I went to a technical college during summer vacations when I was in high school and got a diploma in product illustration when I was about 17. So I pursued artistic things really since then, although the Vietnam unpleasantness got in the way. And I was in the military for a few years where I had less time. And then after I got out and went back to school, obviously school takes time away. But throughout all that, I spent a significant part of the time drawing or sometimes painting until, about 30 years ago, I started really going more toward a full-time career. And that's where I am now.
Yeah, and you've had a very rich life. You were in the military, you were in the medical field. How do you think those things have affected your painting?
Well, I think experience is useful for anyone in almost any pursuit if you pay attention to your experiences. I think that, for example, the military taught me a lot about dedication and purpose and commitment to what I was doing. And that's carried over through my former profession in medicine and through into art production as well. So I think you learn from everything if you have the ears to hear it.
So tell us a little bit about some of your recent projects. What have you been working on in the last few months?
Well, since the pandemic started, actually about a year ago, I decided I was going to move outdoors with some of my painting. Until then, about just over a year ago now, I had done almost all of my work in the studio. Well, all of my oil painting work. I had done watercolor sketching outdoors. I still do, because watercolor equipment's portable and you can slip it in a pocket and it's very easy to carry around. But oil painting takes dedication, and it takes planning, and it takes equipment, it takes work, and it takes a certain amount of, for some people at least, a certain amount of bravado to stand out there in front of God and everybody and paint. Some people don't do that very well, I think. Anyway, about a year ago, I decided to move outdoors more, and over the past year or so, I've probably painted, I haven't got an exact figure, but probably 25 outdoor paintings, maybe more. And some of those are landscapes and some of those are cityscapes. And that's pretty much where I am. I didn't ever expect to become a landscape painter, but I guess that's me at the moment.
Yeah, what are some challenges of working outside or working from life that you maybe wouldn't have if you were working from just like a reference photo?
Oh boy, just think about it for a moment. I mean, today outside it feels like you're in a steam bath. It must be 90 degrees and 90% humidity out there today. Um, that's unpleasant and inconvenient. But sudden rainstorms, animals, uh, not so much these days. The passing parade of people, because people try to keep their social distance when you're outdoors. But well, let me just tell you a story. About 2 months ago, I was painting on a bank, a creek bank, and um, it was cold, so maybe it was late April, and I went in to warm up indoors. And while I was indoors, I heard a funny noise, and I went out, and my easel had blown over in the wind, and the painting that was attached to it had gone in the water. I nearly fell in getting the painting out, but those kinds of things happen, and you have to be prepared.
Yeah, that sounds awful. I can't imagine taking a swim halfway through your painting session.
Well, I was lucky and kept my balance, but it was a near thing. Let me tell you.
So you do a lot of work with landscapes and cityscapes. What do you think draws you to those subjects?
Well, cityscapes are interesting because there's so much variety just in looking at a city. I mean, if you think about it, you go out on the street and there are all these different shapes, but a lot of them are regular shapes, cubes, cylinders, sometimes spheres, although you don't see that one as much. And then they overlap, and there's all kinds of shadows and all kinds of colors and all sorts of opportunities to see people living their lives, interacting with one another out on the street, you know. Sometimes, well, like you can see the painting over my shoulder of the people with the umbrella. Sometimes you see people out there who aren't in the happiest mood, you know. These people here in this painting are trying to find a cab in New York City in the rain, which is, if you've ever been there, one of the most difficult things there is. So that's what I like about the city. Now, landscapes are different because, well, landscapes can show you all kinds of things. They can show you peacefulness, they can show you destruction, they can show you mood. And sometimes it's important just to be able to paint what you see in front of you. So that's what I like about doing landscapes outdoors anyway. You have to confront the subject.
Yeah, what would you say is your favorite part of the painting process? Are you someone who likes the first layer best or the finished product?
Gosh, I don't know. I think the the most fun is that moment when you realize, oh, what a good idea. After that, it can be really good or it can go downhill fast. Sometimes you get in there in the middle of a painting and you wonder how it's ever going to work out. How can this is terrible. I'm never going to finish this. I should throw it away. So you don't feel so good then, but somehow, a lot of the time anyway, it'll come together toward the end. That feels pretty good too.
How do you find the places that you choose to paint? Do you find them ahead of time or do you just go out with an easel and you're like, oh, here we go?
You know, I've done both. You may be familiar with some of the famous artists in years past, like Monet, who used to go out to the same place 2 or 3 or 4 days in a row so that he could finish some of these large works that he did outdoors. And of course, he also kept 2 or 3 works in process, so as the light changed outside, he could move to a different one. So, you know, that's one of the things that I sometimes do. I'll pick the same place and go back several successive days at about the same time, so the light's the same and all that. On the other hand, though, once in a while, I just go out and say, that looks pretty good, and stop and set up the easel. And sometimes those work out, and sometimes you say, boy, I shouldn't have done that. this is not going to work out at all. But, you know, you take your chances.
Do you have any favorite places in town to paint?
Well, lately, and it's primarily because it's close to where my home studio is. Lately, I've been going out to Gray's Lake and also over across Fleur Drive and into Waterworks Park. I mean, Waterworks Park, the Raccoon River meanders through there, and it's I don't know how many, 1,500 acres perhaps of basically a river bottom and trees, and there are a lot of beautiful spots to paint in there. And of course, over at Gray's Lake, you have the advantage you can paint the skyline of Des Moines, for example, from the bank of Gray's Lake. So those two have been a couple of my favorite spots. Before that, I was going over to the fairgrounds. There's a lot to see over there, even when there's no fair going on. A lot of fond memories for people in buildings and vistas along the grand concourse there and all those things. So another place. Actually, landmarks around the city are fun too. So I've gone to some of those.
Yeah. So another project that you've been working on recently are these endangered animal paintings you've been doing. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, that project, actually this endangered species project sort of happened. I have a excuse me, a side interest in computer assisted painting and drawing, and over the past 5 or 6 years, I've done quite a lot of digital work that obviously it's completely different than oil painting or watercolor, those things. But I was attracted by some of these animals because they're so, some of them are just so beautiful and they're just disappearing. So I at first made some digital paintings of a bonobo. We have some bonobos here in Des Moines out at the Great Ape Research Center that I've seen. And so I was interested in them and some other animals. And when the digital work came out looking pretty good, I decided maybe I could do something with it and put it in sales and donate the proceeds. And so what I have is on my website, I've got a subcategory for endangered species where people can buy prints of these animals, and the money will go to fund efforts to preserve the climate and the species.
How has the process of drawing digitally or learning to draw digitally been for you?
Well, I think anybody who is my age and had never done it before will tell you that there's what they call a fairly steep learning curve, meaning that you know, unlike picking up a pencil or a piece of charcoal and drawing on a piece of paper, you've got to know how to make the computer behave and make the kind of images that you want. So there are a lot of programs out there. Most people are fairly familiar, excuse me, I think, familiar with Photoshop, which has been around forever. And that one's just, I think, just too much of an interface, too difficult. But some others out there, one called Sketchbook, another called Painter, and another one, Art Rage, are a bit more intuitive. So those are the ones that I use. And it took me some time and some real effort. And I didn't really think it was ever going to amount to anything. It was more a diversion than anything else. But what I found is that digital work helps to inform the traditional work too. And it's gotten to the point where I say, look, it's all drawing, it's all painting. It doesn't matter what the tool is. You just have to know how to use them.
Yeah. Have you found that your digital drawings inform your traditional work at all?
Oh, certainly. I think, for example, I have a blog that I did basically because a friend of mine said I should, that's called Daily Digitalia. Digitalium, by the way, is just some digital something, a drawing or something that's posted online. In any event, over the past couple of years, I've been posting a drawing every day or two to that blog. And when you bring that kind of continuing effort and continuing daily discipline, you're bound to improve your skills if you have any eyes on you at all. And so that helped me to go back to real world materials like charcoal and graphite and things like that, and actually produce what I think are more accomplished works.
Yeah, and I saw also you've recently done some digital portraits on that blog. You did one of Dr. Fosse, you did one of Frederick Douglass. Can you talk to us a little bit about those portraits and what inspires them?
One of the things that I do every day in the morning is some drawing, and it's most of the time it's from my own practice. It's sort of like if you were I like to make the analogy, if you were a concert pianist, one of the things that you do every day is you warm up with scales or playing little pieces of music or something. And it's sort of analogous to that. What I do is I have what's called a Wacom tablet. It's one of those drawing tablets. I typically can just turn it on and draw. I don't have to go and prepare anything. So I'll sit down and draw on that. And typically I've put out a drawing or two every day. And that's been amazingly helpful. And it led to these portraits because when I read the news, which is the first thing I typically do over a cup of coffee, something crops up. Well, Dr. Fauci obviously has been in the news a great deal, and he has an interesting face, and I decided it would be fun to try to reproduce a likeness of him, which I think worked out pretty good. The one you saw of Frederick Douglass was prompted, actually, that's the second one of him that I've done, but this one was prompted by some recent events. You know, I don't know how many people know about Frederick Douglass, probably the name at least, but this is a man who was born about 1818 into slavery and escaped at age 20 and became an amazing literary and public figure as a former slave. And this well before the Civil War. And he lived into the 1890s. And this guy was an advocate for women's rights and for abolition and for all sorts of other excellent causes. Well, his statue was torn down the other day, and I got thinking about him, and I ran across a photograph made in, I think, 1855 or 56. If you've seen that photo, you've seen it. That photograph, he looks like a block of granite. He looks like a man who's angry and determined and stubborn, and it was just fun to try to capture that expression on his face.
Yeah, and I think that idea of drawing daily is such a great way to just like maintain your practice. Do you have any other words of advice for people who are maybe struggling to keep up with things during isolation?
Well, gosh, I think the biggest piece of advice is one that I was given by somebody else long ago, and I call it the Nike approach, which is just do it. Well, people say, well, I don't have anything to draw with. Well, you've got a pencil and a piece of paper. I think that persistence or perseverance or dedication or discipline, any one of those words works. The answer is it has to be something that becomes a habit. It's so easy to stop. That's easier than going on. There are times when you want to do anything but pick up a paintbrush or a stylus. And the truth is, if it's what you do, then that's what you
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for all of your words of wisdom and also for sharing so much of your practice with us. I have one final question for you. If
Sure.
anyone's interested in seeing more of your work or getting in touch with you at all, where should they go to do that?
Well, my website is my name, garyhoff.com. Um, and then I have a couple of blogs that are accessible through there or directly. One of them I already mentioned, and the other one is a studio journal blog where I have all sorts of things about painting or digital work or other sorts of aesthetic things. But I think through the website's the best way.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being here with me today, Gary.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you.
I heard your shining voice and I recall we need art, let's make it known.